Great. Welcome, everybody, as you come on in. Let's see. Looks like we've got almost everybody who is in the waiting room. My name is Jennifer Donlin Wyatt. I'm the Transportation Planning Manager. I'm your host this evening. Thank you for all joining us and for filing in through the Zoom portal. We're going to let folks just join as we get ready. If you'd like to communicate to us, or if you have a question, you can put it in the chat box. That's going to be our main form of communication. Your chat should be your button. If you haven't found it on Zoom yet, it should be on the bottom towards the center of your window. Looks like more folks are coming in. I'm going to start with the sharing of my screen so folks know they are in the right place and not just some random Zoom meeting. So that also means that I will be unable to see if there are people in the waiting room or anything like that. So I will defer to the project team to give me a thumbs up on when you think we're ready to go. But in the meantime, for folks who are just joining, my name is Jennifer, and I'm the city's Transportation Planning Manager, and you're here for the Transportation Priorities Plan meeting, phase 2, the initial prioritization. If you have comments or questions, please put them in the chat, and we'll be monitoring that and answer questions later on in the session. And while we're waiting for folks to join in, I see a couple of folks who have their cameras on. Can you give me a head shake or a thumbs up if you see my PowerPoint presentation? Awesome, thank you. I always worry that I think I'm presenting and then I'm not. Not that it's happened, but you know, technology, things go wrong. Great, thank you.
And Jennifer, we do have a steady group of people that are still signing on, but okay, you're welcome to join, but I would just take it slow as people are still kind of signing on.
Okay, great. Thanks, Katie. So I'll get started with an overview of the effort. So as I mentioned before, thank you so much for coming. Pretty excited to have you here this evening. My name is Jennifer Donlin Wyatt. I am the City of Sacramento's Transportation Planning Manager. And we are here this evening to talk about the Transportation Priorities Plan, phase 2, the initial prioritization. If you'd like to ask questions or provide a comment, please do so in the chat box. We had a lot of people register. We'll see, you know how it works with Zoom. Maybe I would say 60 to 70% of the people who registered might show up. You are all muted and your cameras can be on or off. That is your choice. I like seeing faces, so I'm not talking into a black box, but of course it's your call. I'd like to take a moment to introduce the project team so that you know who they are. We forgot to do the Zoom background so that we all look the same, so apologies on that. So first we have Katie, who's going to be helping us with the logistics and everything, great like that. We have Adrian, who is one of our engineers on the process. We have Jackie, and we have Angela, who also have been helping us with community engagement and equitable processes. And that is your project team here this evening. I also want to thank the project team for all their effort that they made to make this happen today. So it looks like we've slowed down on the steady stream in of folks. I'm going to start on the presentation. Again, if you have questions, please put them in the chat box and we'll be monitoring that. So this evening, we're here to talk about the Transportation Priorities Plan, to talk about phase 2. This is the first of 2 sessions. They'll be the same. We just wanted one on a weekday evening in case that works better for you. And then we also have one on Saturday morning in case Saturday morning works better for folks. And so what we're going to go over this evening is a recap of what is the Transportation Priorities Plan. I see some familiar names, so some of you may have been engaged in the first phase, but maybe some of you are new, and this will recap what we did. What is the TPP, and then what we've done to date. We'll go over the initial prioritization, and then ways that you can share your inputs. So first I want to start off with, do you know that not only do we have new transportation projects that we have handled, the city of Sacramento is responsible for maintaining our existing infrastructure. And that existing infrastructure includes 1,800 miles of streets, 750 miles of bike lanes, 78 miles of those shared use paths, plus countless curb ramps, street lights, traffic signals, pedestrian scale lighting, all of that we need to maintain and take care of. And you all want us to take care of that. And I think that makes sense. And that's a great thing that we should be doing. But we also have planned projects. And in fact, we have over 700 projects that the city has collaborated with the communities on in about the last 20 years to identify improvements. And those improvements could be anything from a new bike lane to a new traffic signal or a new crosswalk or a new stop sign. And so there are 700 of those planned improvements, but we don't have a way to, those planned improvements cost about $5 billion, and that's a lot of money, $5 billion. I don't have $5 billion of the city. And in fact, the city doesn't pay for transportation through its general fund. The way that transportation is funded is essentially three ways. Good, quick tutorial on that. The first is your gas tax. Every time you fill up your car, there's a gas tax included in that, and that gas tax that we get anywhere between between $9 and $12 million a year. That's specifically for street maintenance, and so we use that to repave our streets. Repaving our streets is not cheap. In fact, everything with transportation is ridiculously expensive. We don't set those rules, but that's what it is. So, for example, to repave a mile or so can cost $4 million. And that's a lower cost. It can cost up to $7 million if you need greater repair. And so transportation is expensive. So right now we're estimating that we have a $5 billion backlog and we don't have that money. So we pay with either gas tax. Then there's the existing sales tax measure, which is a measure specifically for transportation countywide. We use that money, one, to help with staff time, to pay for staff, and to apply for grants, because this is where the most of our transportation money comes from, our competitive grants. And most competitive grants require the city to contribute to that money, usually anywhere between 20 and 50% of the total project cost. Those grants are competitive. We don't ever know if we're going to get it or not. So it's usually a shot in the dark. You know, we try. We're not a shot in the dark. We're professionals. We know the grants that are out there. We know what could be funded, but we also have a long list. And so we might apply for 10 projects and only get 5 funded. And we might not even get the full project funded. And that's actually most often what happens, so that we might have a project and we'll only get a third of it funded. And then we have to go back in the next round. And so it just takes a really long time. And in fact, we think it would take over 100 years to build out those planned projects that we know about now, not including the things that we haven't worked on yet, the other things that you'd like to see in our city. And so 100 years is a long time, and we don't have a way to prioritize that. Who's to say that the improvements on Stockton Boulevard should happen before the improvements on Lemon Hill or on J Street downtown or Marysville Boulevard in North Sacramento? And so we've never prioritized citywide like this. So this is the first time we're doing it, the process to prioritize the city's investments in transportation. And so we're in phase 2. During phase 1, we did a lot of community engagement, and this happened over 2020 into 2022. We held virtual gatherings just like this one, where folks, heard about it and provided their input. We had an online survey and a paper survey, and those surveys were available in Chinese, English, Hmong, Spanish, and Vietnamese. The paper surveys were available in our libraries. Our community centers weren't open at the time, but the libraries were. And so we collaborated with the libraries to offer paper surveys. And then we attended existing meetings. We contacted over 100 organizations and said, hey, are you doing something? Can we attend your meeting? A lot of times we got on the agenda, and that was great. We got to talk to a bunch of people. Sometimes the agendas were full. And so instead, those community organizations shared out the information about either our virtual gatherings or the surveys to let the information get out there. And then we did social media. We did videos, which was super fun to do. I think I'm a little dorky in my part in the video, but that's okay. It's at sactransportation.org, but we had famous people like Sue Teranishi, Joe Flores, Ann Stosbald, and Mr. Glenn Jackson. And famous in that they're the local folks who care about their city and care about transportation, and they talked about issues that are important to them. So we did a lot of this engagement, and we asked folks, well, what are your transportation values? What types of efforts does the city prioritize funding? And this is what you told us. I know this is a lot. You can't read this. Again, I'm going to plug our website, sactransportation.org. But this is what the outcome was. Invest in transportation so that it improves air quality, climate, and health. Provide equitable investment. Provide access to destinations. Improve transportation safety. and fix and maintain the system. Now I can go on and on about each one of these 5 categories because I have a lot of thoughts about them. But we have a limited time together, so I'm not going to. But City Council adopted this criteria and these metrics in March of 2022 and said this is the process for investing in transportation and how we're going to prioritize. So we finished phase 1 in March, and now we're into phase 2, the initial prioritization. Phase 3 is the draft plan. So there'll be a couple of times for which you can weigh in on the prioritization and the process. And this is just the initial one. So for phase 2, since March, what we've done is we've mapped the over 700 projects that were approved. And we were going back to scans from like 2002 and looking at what those improvements were and mapping them in GIS software to newer ones that we had already in a data set, which was much easier to incorporate. Then we evaluated and scored all of these planned projects according to the approved criteria, those 5 criteria we just talked about. Then, since then, we developed an engagement plan. So you would know about what we're doing and you had an opportunity to provide input. And so we developed a story page with maps and scoring so you can go into the detail about how the scoring came to be. We're attending a lot of community events. We were just talking about being at the Banana Festival this weekend, but we're also going to a lot of neighborhood associations. We're holding 2 virtual workshops. You're at the first one, yay. And we have an online map comment tool. We have the roadshow. So our team, both city staff and our consulting team, are going to a lot of organizations. This is just an example, but a small cross-section of the folks that we're going to and having conversations with them on it. But you're here to say, hey, Jennifer, what are the initial prioritizations? And we'll get to that right now. So you can't see really what's on the map. I'm going to dive in a little bit closer in a second, but it's an interactive online map. And I wanted to quickly summarize some of the recommendations. So I know you're probably like, what do the colors mean? Quickly, colors mean purple. It's a high priority. Yellow or golden is a medium priority, and green is a lower priority. And those are based on the values that you told us. And those projects that best meet those values will rise to the top. And the black lines mean they're projects that are funded, but we haven't broken ground yet. So construction hasn't started, but we didn't want you to think we forgot about them. So we included them on that. So in the initial prioritization, there are 364 miles of planned improvements. 41 miles made the top priority. You may say, Jennifer, why only 41 miles? Well, a mile of complete street improvements that includes accessibility, better operations is about $20 million. So if we talk about 41 miles of priority projects, we're over $800 million worth of work. That's a lot of money. So we want to limit those high priority projects because we want to make sure that we're not communicating to you that it'll be done soon. And we want to also set these reasonable expectations. So 41 miles made high priority. 70% of those initial high priority projects are on what we call the high injury network. So we're a Vision Zero city, or a city that really is investing in transportation safety because we are the worst city in California for transportation safety. When we did our initial Vision Zero analysis, 225 miles of our 1,800 miles are what we call the high injury network, or those streets with the highest number of severe injuries and fatalities. So 70% of those high priority improvements are on our high injury network, those streets that see the highest number of severe injuries and fatalities, because we're not doing anything else. One of the biggest things we're trying to do is save lives on our streets. 80% of the initial high priority projects support bicycling, and 100% support walking. And by walking, I mean, it might include a new crosswalk, it might include a new sidewalk, it might include connections to a bus stop for shade and shelter. 90% of the initial high priority projects are on streets with poor pavement quality. And you're like, wait, Jennifer, all of our streets have poor pavement quality. You're pretty close to right. But 90% have poor pavement quality and serve a lot of people, because we're trying to be equitable in our process and see how we can serve the most people with a little bit of funding that we have. And then 95% of the initial high priority projects benefit communities that lack basic infrastructure, basic transportation infrastructure. And I don't know who's on the call right now, and you may or may not know that there are significant parts of the city of Sacramento that don't have basic infrastructure. They don't have curb, gutter, sidewalk. They don't have street trees. They don't have street lights or crosswalks across the street. And so we mapped all that, and I'll show you in a little bit. But the outcome was that 95% of these high priority projects are benefiting those communities. So with that, this is my note to myself that you get to see that I'm going to switch over to show you the online mapping. So I'm going to stop share because I don't know how to be fancy and move from one share to another share. All right, great. To move you over. So I wanted to share with you our story page. Hold on one second. I'm sharing a screen, but now I can't see you. All right, so I want to share with you the story page. And the story page is the background for you if you're newer to the Transportation Priorities Plan, or if you're interested in what the data was behind how we developed the prioritization. And so this story page is available in Chinese, English, Hmong, Spanish, and Vietnamese, but I'm going to show you the English one. And you basically scroll to see the story of the Transportation Priorities Plan. An introduction, basically what I just told you, defines what a transportation project is. I think I forgot to mention earlier, if you know me, I'm the biggest fan of transit. I like the bus better than light rail, but it's all good. But we don't run transit. That's a different agency, and we're really focusing in this effort on what the city has control over. So this defines what a transportation project is, talks about phase one and the community values. It talks about how projects were prioritized, and it has links. So if you wanted to click into it, this would open a link to the processes that were adopted by council. And then it introduces each of the 5 criteria with the metrics and how they were prioritized. If you haven't been to the Sacramento Northern Bike Trail up there, it's a beautiful place, and you should check it out. So one of the first criteria is supporting air quality, climate, and health. And one of the metrics is supporting bicycling. So we're looking at these planned projects to see whether or not they support bicycling. And this map will allow you to zoom in or zoom out. So you can zoom in and you can see, okay, there's a project here on Folsom Boulevard. It's a light orange. That means that it doesn't support bicycling as well as this project here on Stockton Boulevard. So you can see the information with the colors communicating how well it did in that category. And you can scroll all over the city. I'm being limited in my scrolling because when I do this and I do Zoom when I'm presenting, my computer doesn't like it. So I'm being a little bit limited on it, but you can check it out yourself. Another criteria is as part of air quality, climate, health, supporting walking. And so you can look at this map here and you could see the projects that we've already planned and work with the communities on, whether or not they support bicycling. I'm going to go to South of Thomas now. And so you can see the green line here. This is a project that supports bicycling. There's another one on that might be Acevedo, doesn't support walking as well. And you can do that for all of the criteria and the process. I encourage you to read this to have an understanding of how we're working. Supporting transit, again, showing here. The one thing I do want to show you before my computer freezes is, then we have the composite. So supporting air quality, climate, and health was determined to have projects support bicycling, support walking, and support access to transit and electric vehicles. And these scores combined are these purple lines on the map here. The darker the purple, the better it supports that metric or that criteria. I'm seeing some head shaking, so I'm thinking I'm explaining it well and folks are getting it. So that makes me happy. And we did that for all 5 criteria. And so the next one is equitable investment. Just going to do a quick overview. As I mentioned, not all parts of the city have the same level of infrastructure. This is the Paso Heights neighborhood, right near the Parkway. It's a bus stop. We don't have sidewalks. So setting the context of looking at equitable investment. So I mentioned earlier, we mapped in the city where we have and don't have basic transportation infrastructure. And those areas that are shown here in green don't have that basic infrastructure. So they would get prioritization in this process. Yes, if I can get to the next one, great, I can. Another big effort of this was providing equitable investment to benefit communities that have been recipients of racism and bias. So this is foundational to the work that we did. And so we use the most recent census data to identify communities that are predominantly Black, Latino, Asian, Pacific Islander, and or Indigenous. And you'll see these here in the golden color are those neighborhoods. And so you can see that through for all these again, and then you get the composite again. So the darker purple, the bigger bigger the project supports equitable investment. And you can see that for all 5 criteria, whether it's access to destinations, such as access to jobs, or access to schools, or to parks. So that's the backstory. You scroll to the bottom of this map and it links you to the prioritization map. And this is what you all came here to see. I know it is. Again, the purple colors is the high priority projects. Golden or yellow or orange, it all depends on how you see it, are the medium priority projects, and the green are the lower priority projects. Black lines are those projects that are funded but haven't broken ground for construction. So you can scroll around and you can look at these, you can see what's going on. I'm going to scroll here. This is Stockton Boulevard. what you can do is you can click on the line and there's a pop-up and it tells you about the project. It's a lot of information, but what it tells you is this is part of the Stockton Boulevard Mobility Project, which is a complete streets and safety project. It also includes some transit facility and some bikeways. And talks about a lane reduction identified here as well. So removing a car travel lane and providing other forms of mobility in that place. So you can learn more about the projects that are identified here. You can even learn about the fully funded projects. Like this is the Del Rio Trail, which is fully funded. And I don't know, we're breaking ground pretty soon on that construction. So you can go across and look at different places. I believe this is Fruit Ridge. And you can see what these planned improvements are. So it's a bikeway. It includes some landscaping, lighting, trash bins, better sidewalks and bikeways. And so I encourage you to move around here and to understand what those projects are. And then what you can do is, here's your legend up here. You click on that. You can see other people's comments, or you can place a comment. I'm going to place a fake comment right now. I'm going to hit the purple button down here at the bottom, place a comment. A pop-up box will happen up here. You're able to click on the little icon and you can drop it. I'm going to drop it here on Fruit Ridge Boulevard. And you'll see your green dot here. It tells you that you clicked on the area. Hit next. And you can tell us you might have expected this project to be a higher priority. This is already purple, so it's high priority, but you can tell us your thoughts. You expect it to be a lower priority. It doesn't meet those values that we approved. Or is it missing a previously approved project in a city planning process? Now, this is key. We went back 20 years. I've only been with the city for 5 years, but I went back to talk with folks that have been around longer. We went through our adopted resolutions to try to find everything that city council has approved for transportation in the last 20 years. That doesn't mean we missed something. We might have. If you know about that, please let us know. Or maybe you're missing a transportation need. Jennifer, you don't have a planned project here, but it's really hard to cross the street and there's a school over here and that connection is really important. Let us know that. Or maybe you have a general comment that you want to share with us. So you can click any of them. I'm going to click general comment, describe the issue. And please be clear in your comments. The issue is, I don't know, need a crosswalk. I'm just making stuff up as we go. We're asking for your email address. And the reason why we ask that is maybe we don't understand your comments and we want to make sure that we understand everything that you share. So we might want to follow up with you by email. And we're asking for zip codes. And the reason why we're asking for zip codes is that we want to make sure that we're getting pretty good representation from folks across the city. And where we're not getting that, we're tracking by zip code, we can do focused engagement to say, hey, we're not hearing from your area. Can you help us get the word out to your neighbors, your friends, and folks to share that out? And then you click next. I'm not going to because it might mess up the system a little bit, but that's how you submit a comment. You can, I'm going to go up here to Northgate. I thought there was a comment on Northgate, maybe there wasn't. I'm going to go over to Truxell. So there's a comment on Truxell right here. You see that purple arrow? I'm going to click on that. I didn't click on it quite right, so I'm going to try again. Here we go. So the comment that pops up here is that somebody said, I expected this project to be a higher priority. Truxell is a major artery in and out of town. Now, if you like that and you agree with that, you say, I'm going to upvote that, and you click on the upvote. You can also say, I think Truxell is really important because there's going to be transit on there, and we really need transit in South and North of Columbus. That could be something you might say. And then so you click it and then you post. And so that way you can upvote other people's comments. I'm not going to do that because I'm not voting, you are. But so that's the process on the map. So I'm going to stop sharing again so I can go back to the presentation. All right, so you saw that presentation. So we have our story page, we have the comment map, which I just showed you, and we have comment cards. We have comment cards on our website, which is like a comment form. We also have paper comment forms that we're taking to all the in-person events we're going to. All three of these are available in Chinese, English, Hmong, Spanish, and Vietnamese. And you can find everything at sactransportation.org to find all that and all the different languages that are available. And so, Jennifer, what is the process? That's what you're saying. So we're in August right now, and we're telling everybody about this, and we want folks to take a look at the data, take a look at the initial prioritization, and share your comments. We're taking comments through September 6th. I know there are a couple of neighborhood organizations that are meeting on the 7th and 8th, so we're going to touch base with them. But early September is our goal, so that we can review the community comments and I can submit my staff report to go to council. I don't know if you've ever worked with us at the city before, but submitting our staff reports to council takes some time. And in order for me to go to council in October, we got to submit it in September. But we'd like to go to council in October and say city council. These are the initial priorities. These are the comments we received from the communities. What do you say, council? And council will provide us some direction. We'll revise through, late fall into early winter. We will revise the prioritization based on that comment and that direction, and then come out with a draft plan. And this draft plan, you might notice, you're like, hey, Jennifer, where's a PDF document for me to review? We don't have a PDF document to review. This is more of an online initial touch to get your feedback. And that's why we're walking people through the process, because not everybody's comfortable with using online maps. You could do also the comment form to share your information. But then we'll have a draft plan, and that will be a PDF document that will have narrative and text and all that great sort of stuff. And we'll come back out to you in something similar to this. Say, what do you think? Did we get it right? And you'll let us know. Hopefully you'll let us know. And then we'll take that draft plan, revise it, and bring it to council, ideally for approval in April of 2023. So that's our process. We're flexible. This is not funded through grants. We're using our local dollars, so we have a little bit more flexibility. But we also want to we want to move with expediency. And the reason why is that, I don't know if you've heard of the Biden infrastructure package. That's what I'll call it, because most people know about that. There's a lot of transportation funding available in that. And we want to make sure that we pursue projects that are best aligned with our community values. And this process is designed to identify those projects, those transportation investments that align with community values, given our limited funding. If we had unlimited funding, I would build it all. I would love to. I don't think that any of these projects are bad. I don't think any of the ideas that our community members tell us around transportation changes are not good ideas. In fact, most of them are fantastic. It's just that we don't have any money and we have to prioritize what we're investing in versus not. So with that, you'll find our materials at sactransportation.org. I really encourage you to look at the story map to understand the background, and then move around the online map to click on the planned projects and identify what those are, submit your comments, and if you support or like the other comments from other folks, you can upvote those as well and provide comments on them. So with that, that is the presentation. I'm looking forward to your questions and comments. And Katie, would you be able to help me with that?
Absolutely. So we have a great comment section going on right now, and that is fantastic. Please put all of your comments in the section, but we'd like to start off really quickly with a very quick live poll. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the instructions right here. We like just to know who's in the room real quick. We're going to go to menti.com. Again, you're going to see it here on the screen, where you can enter in the code 9771 6687. So again, I'm going to leave this up on the screen for a second. We have 3 very quick questions that we're going to get through. And so again, I put it also in the chat box. So again, menti.com 9771 6687. All right. And with that, let me start the polling. So again, the first question we have is, what neighborhood do you live in? Right, it looks like we got a couple people from Hollywood Park. Wonderful. Again, we're going to leave this up for about 30 seconds. Again, as the names get bigger, that means that more people are responding with that question or that answer. Sure thing. I'm going to repost the code. Here you go, Diana. All right, I'm going to leave this up for just another few seconds as we get some more answers in. All right. Wonderful. All right, I'm going to go to the second question now. Oh, wait, a couple more answers popped up in here. And again, if you're having any issues, feel free to put it in the chat box and you'll see it in there. Again, menti.com 9771 6687. All right, now we want to learn about what do you love the most about Sacramento? You can elaborate in a very quick kind of box. The poll isn't working for me. Sorry about that. Again, great bike trails, everything, people, diversity. I do love the trees, keeps it cool. Wonderful. All right, these are some great answers coming in through the chat box here or through the Menti poll here. And again, if the poll is not working for you, feel free to put your answers in the chat box as well. We do take down all of the information in there. All right, and then we have our last question is, what are some key areas for improving transportation and mobility here in Sacramento?
I love all the questions, but I'm most excited for this.
Yeah, again, take a moment. All right, this should give us some really great answers in here. All right. And again, I'm going to leave this last question up for about the last 30 seconds or so before we come back to the Zoom and go through some chat boxes. But again, really appreciate everyone's answers and engaging in our poll here. Oh, these are some great answers. All right. And with that, I will stop the sharing and we will go back to our chat box. So Jennifer, the first question we have was, I'm not sure how you do transportation planning without talking to transit. Is RT involved in coverage or supporting of these priority projects?
So the city of Sacramento is very engaged with regional transit. As I said earlier, I'm one of the biggest fans of transit there is out there, and whatever we can do at the city within our resources to help them succeed. And in fact, my meeting from 4 to 5 o'clock today was with regional transit, talking about a project that we really hope to move forward that would really improve transit operations. And so I think a big part of the work that we do is the city of Sacramento manages the infrastructure that transit travels on. And so that means we can provide potentially dedicated lanes. I'm a big fan of bus lanes, and the Stockton Boulevard project includes a bus lane. We can provide transit priority at traffic signals. So when a bus arrives, it can have priority to move ahead so it's not slowed down and caught in traffic. We can talk about improved bus stops. And so that's a gray area that's both the city and regional transit. We will work on those together. And in fact, we've got a project working with regional transit right now on that. And regional transit is working on their own bus stop project as well, and that we're engaged with. So there is a lot of collaboration. It's just that we don't manage that, and our funding sources are very distinct and very different. But I promise you a lot of collaboration and a lot of excitement and support for RT.
Wonderful. All right, the next two questions focus on some bike lanes. Augustine asked where they can find details on the different type of bikeways and definitions and details of the different bikeways, of the different buffered bike lanes. Is that all on sactransportation.org or?
It's not. No, that's a great question. And so there's some information in our bike plan, but I think maybe what we should do is put something up on sactransportation.org that describes the different types of bikeways.
Absolutely.
Adrian, can you note that and remind me we should do that?
Yep.
Awesome.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
And continuing with the bike conversation, will safe barriers be added to the bike lanes? One of the biggest issues with existing bike lanes is that lack of safety and separation from vehicle traffic.
Yeah, yes, I agree. And so one of the biggest things that we want to do is not only build for people who are bicycling now, but build for people who would like to bicycle, but maybe aren't comfortable. And so we want to build for people who are 8 years old, who are 80 years old, and then everybody in between, right? And so that's our goal. And we have a structure set up to guide our process based on vehicle volumes and vehicle speeds. And the higher the volume of cars and the faster they go, the more separation we'd like to do. They're not cheap to implement. You know, you probably saw some of ours downtown. We're expanding those downtown next year, which is pretty exciting. We're going to double those in size, which is great. And as we get more funding, that is our goal, because ultimately a bikeway that's separated or an off-street path are the types of facilities that are going to serve the most people and get the most benefits. And so that's a big part of our objective.
Great. I'm glad you ended on funding, because the next two questions kind of talk about some funding. So is there any consideration for any projects that don't cost very much that could make a difference, but isn't in a poorly serviced neighborhood?
So this person must know me, or maybe not know me, but know that's one of my passions in life, is to find those cheap, and I'm using cheap in quotes because nothing in transportation is cheap, but those quick builds, inexpensive efforts that we can do. And in fact, we have a little pot of money that we set aside every year to do that. Most of the time we find out about them through 311. So I encourage everybody on the call tonight to know and love 311, because it comes to our teams and helps us identify issues. I also happen to be somebody who walks, bikes, takes transit, and drives throughout the entire city. I'm a resident in the city. And so I also get my ideas of like, how can we spend money? How can we use our money wisely to make these inexpensive but quick build projects? And then we go to our Active Transportation Commission. I'm going to do a plug for them. They are our official body to advise us on walking and biking in the city. They meet the third Thursday of every month, right now by Zoom. I encourage you. And in fact, I saw Commissioner Hops earlier on the call. I'm assuming he's still here. But he's a member of that commission, and that body is a great body, and they advise us. So yes, that's something I'd like to do. And in fact, one that wasn't so cheap, but pretty inexpensive. For those of you who know Oak Park at 34th, 2nd in Broadway, it's an awkward triangle intersection. It was before the pandemic, and so my time is all off. But before the pandemic, we piloted for about 4 days a closure of 2nd Avenue between 34th and Broadway. Closed it to drivers, kept it open for people walking and biking. There are a lot of vehicular car crashes. A lot of drivers are coming off of Broadway, going fast up north of 34th. People are coming out on 2nd Avenue. If you know the area, it's just a recipe for crashes. So we did a temporary closure, and we asked the communities and the businesses, the people who live there, what they thought, and they liked it. So then we looked under couch cushions. We said, where can we find some more money to make this a little bit more permanent? And we found some money to make it, it's not beautiful. I can't tell you that it is. It's a bunch of orange delineators and maybe not the most attractive. But we were able to move it forward in a quasi-temporary manner. And then we received another grant to make it permanent. And that'll be moving forward in I can't say when, a couple of years, I hope. It has to go through design. And so we try to build on efforts like that to do these shorter term improvements. Ideally, they'll all be made permanent and more structurally sound, or more structural. But as I mentioned, funding is hard. But we look for it, and we take every opportunity we can on those quick builds.
So David asked the question, so these won't include any federal funding? Question mark?
No, almost all projects include federal funding. And those are the grants that we go after. And so our gas tax pays for the street maintenance, and we try to couple street maintenance with other improvements, like putting in a bike lane, a crosswalk, those sorts of things. And then we have our Measure A that we use for the grants. The grants come from predominantly 3 sources. They are SACOG. SACOG is the Sacramento Area Council of Governments. They are a metropolitan planning organization, basically the regional government, just for simplicity. And they manage most of the federal dollars that are allocated to our region. And so we compete for those federal dollars through SACOG. So that's some of the federal dollars. Then there are state grants, like the Active Transportation Program, that includes both the state and SACOG. We also go after that. And then there are federal grants. Typically, the federal grants are, it's hard for Sacramento to compete, but we like to compete, and I'm a competitive person by nature, so give me a challenge and I'm going to go after it. And in fact, we're going after a federal grant right now as part of the Biden infrastructure package, or the bipartisan infrastructure law. That included a new grant program called Safe Streets and Roads for All. It is a grant program specifically for federal dollars for safety, with prioritization for communities that are under-resourced and underserved. And so we are applying for the Marysville Boulevard corridor improvements in North Sacramento. It's a $20 million project. It's a lot of money and a lot of effort, and it's due in a couple of weeks. And that's my other big effort besides this effort that I'm leading right now. The other big thing about this grant, which is both exciting and terrifying at the same time. It requires that you finish it in 5 years. And sometimes there are unknowns that happen with transportation, but sometimes you have to go big or go home. And that's what we're doing with Marysville.
Great. Really quick to continue that, do you know where Sacramento ranks in funding compared to other jurisdictions? That was a question that came in.
Well, I don't know if we've done a ranking, but I think that when you compare Sacramento to, for example, Oakland, we're similar in population. We're slightly larger geographically, but similar in population. Oakland has the same thing, and their gas tax to repave their streets. They also have a sales tax measure they have for transportation, but then they also passed a significant parcel tax or a tax on property that went to transportation and housing. And Oakland's been able to move mountains in terms of transportation with that funding that they have. And so that's a big one. And in fact, the city of Austin and the city of Seattle did something similar. And they did significant parcel tax measures that raised big dollars that they bonded for not only transportation improvements like infrastructure, like I manage, but transit improvements as well. And so that's how they're able to rapidly expand their transit systems. And so when you think, it's a lot of different sources, but Sacramento does not have that same type of funding as some of our partner cities. Another challenge that we face is that we're a government town, in case you haven't noticed. And the government agencies aren't required to follow our rules about if you build a new infrastructure, a new development, a new building, that you have to build that bike lane in front of it or do whatever the city requires of private developers. They don't have to. So being a government town makes it a little bit more challenging for us in terms of transportation. But then we get all the great state jobs out of it too. And, I like my friends who work for the state, but it's just a financial challenge for us in mobility.
Got it. All right, so the next question came in because Jackie was thinking about comments she often hears about safety and people running or riding around the trails near the river. Is there any coordination with other sectors for things for public safety or public health?
Yes, absolutely. A lot of coordination. Not something that I manage, but I have a quarterly check-in with our police department around transportation safety. We just had it last week. Because again, we are a Vision Zero city, so coordination with PD is important. The trails are different because the trails are managed either by city rangers or county rangers if it's the American River Parkway. So the American River Parkway is not a city effort. It's managed by the county and their rangers, but there is definitely a lot of coordination. And if you see any issues on any of our trails, please report it to 311 and they'll be routed to the appropriate folks. I recently biked up to visit our friends in Jibe in North Natomas, and I have a shout out to Becky. I see her in the audience. And I took the Ueda Parkway up there. And I noticed an issue on the Ueda Parkway when I was going up there, and I reported to 311 and it's getting addressed. So please, again, 311 is essential for us to know because we're in a lot of places, but we can't be everywhere in the city at all times. And so your eyes and ears are helpful.
Great. Richard has a great question. Are there plans to make this information publicly accessible in the long term past the comment period? Citizens are going to be really interested in seeing both the status of these projects and how the priorities change over time.
That is my goal. And so what I'm really hoping is, I don't know if you've been to our websites, they're pretty static. They have a list of like these projects and it's pretty boring, descriptive. To be frank, I think it's kind of boring. And so what I hope is to take what we're doing here with this mapping and translate it into something that our broader department will use to keep you all updated so that you'll be able to click on the Del Rio Trail, see that it's got its funding and construction is going to break ground on whenever it's going to be, know who the project manager is so that you can contact them if you want to. That's my longer term goal. I don't know if we have a specific solution yet, but it's an outcome I definitely want to see because I think that we need to do a better job of communicating to you all so that you know what's going on and that you can keep us accountable and that you can be excited for the work that we do because we are doing a lot of work, but it's not readily apparent on our websites.
Great. So Diana wants to know that you said in your presentation that SAC is the worst city in California for transportation safety. Can you expound on this? So as part of our grant that we were working on we used to be number 3, and I always said that we're number 3. And number 3 comes from the California Office of Traffic Safety, OTS. They do their annual rankings. They've been a little bit slow on those rankings lately, but we're generally around number 3.
but we're working on a new analysis for our Marysville Safe Streets for All grant application to the federal government. And the federal government's requiring that we use this metric, and it's people killed on our streets per every 100,000 residents. And we're hitting 10 people per every 100,000 per year. And they did an analysis of all the major cities. We hire consultants to do it because I don't have enough staff. So we hire consultants, and they did an analysis of all the major cities in California. And we are not only the highest in California, we're higher than on average for California and higher than the national average. So that's the data that we use. The predominant factor in our serious injuries and fatalities is speed, people driving at unsafe speeds. So please, everybody, slow down, because even if you're still involved in a crash, if you're driving slower, you're more likely to survive, or whoever you hit is more likely to survive if you're going at a slower speed. And so driving at unsafe speeds and driving while impaired are our key factors. So don't drive fast and don't drive under the influence. That's my soapbox for you tonight.
Sue actually asked about speed limits and if we're going to be able to get any of them lowered, especially on that Vision Zero high priority zone.
Oh, good question, Sue. So maybe, potentially. This year, signed into law by Governor Newsom, was Assembly Bill 43. And the gist of AB 43, as we call it, is giving the cities additional discretion for which we can round down in how we set speed limits. Because currently we're required to set speed limits at basically how fast people drive. Not what we want them to drive, but how fast they are driving. And so AB 43 allows us, under certain circumstances, to round down. And in fact, I know I was talking to my colleagues in San Francisco and Los Angeles earlier this week, and they've already implemented that where they're allowed, which is in business districts and a couple other locations. We're much smaller staffed in those bigger partner cities. So we're looking into making that happen this year. And so we're looking to do that. But that's not the question. The question was on the high injury network. So AB 43 also allowed for additional rounding down on the high injury network. However, it requires the state to do certain things first. And the state has until the end of 2024 to make that happen. And so once the state puts those rules in place for basically you have to define what a high injury network is, because what City of Sacramento defines it one way, Oakland might define it a different way, Santa Monica might a different way. So the state's required to get us all on board on the same meeting. When that happens, City of Sacramento will take advantage. We always take advantage of any opportunity we have to lower our speed limits. And when you're out there driving, remember it's a limit, it's not a minimum. So it's always okay to go a little bit slower as well. All right, Katie, what's the next question?
All right, so we have two questions coming from Austin and Augustine about, are there any plans to close any streets to cars, and who oversees that? Is that a transportation issue or a city council issue?
Yeah, that is a great question, because I know a lot of folks were frustrated with the reopening of the streets downtown as we come out of the pandemic. It's not something I'm directly involved in, but California Vehicle Code, so I know about it and I can give you the short summary of it. California Vehicle Code has only certain conditions for which you're allowed to permanently close a street to people driving. And I know that because my team, we closed 34th Street. No, I'm sorry, we closed 2nd Avenue between 34th and Broadway in Oak Park as part of our effort. And we used the reasoning for safety, since there are high numbers of crashes at that intersection. So the California Vehicle Code limits that. And then, the California Vehicle Code does not have provisions for closing streets permanently, for creating places to walk, bike, enjoy, eat, be creative, whatever it might be. So the Vehicle Code doesn't allow it. And that's one piece. The other piece is that any street closure needs full council approval. You have to go to council, they have to vote, and they have to adopt it. And so at this time, it's not on the agenda of something that council's asked us to look at. We actually work at our city manager's direction, who works at city council's direction. It's a little awkward. Basically, city council hasn't asked us to work on it or not, and they have not asked us to work on it. I think that's the short answer. It's complex. I also enjoyed it, but it's beyond the control at the staff level.
Got it. All right, Jennifer also asked a great question. If there is a process for neighborhoods to seek to reverse an improvement, or if they don't feel like it's improving the neighborhood, how best do they contact, or who do they contact at the city to have their concerns be heard?
Well, I'd probably start with 311. So it depends on what the improvement is, because there's a whole breadth of it, a smaller improvement or a bigger improvement. And so generally we will undo it if there's a significant safety issue. So does the data show that there are a lot of crashes, or is it creating significant congestion, right? Like gridlock. I don't know if we've done anything that's caused gridlock, but maybe we have. And so I would start off with contacting 311 for traffic safety issue or traffic issues through the traffic investigators, and they can route it to the appropriate person.
Great. Again, a lot of really great comments in here about some cheap projects and kind of some stuff about mass and transit, which is fantastic. Jennifer, can you remind everybody that aside from attending these meetings and providing feedback, how can folks not working directly with the city stay as much up to date involved with transportation and planning projects?
Sign up for our email list, and that way folks can know. And the email list is at sactransportation.org in the middle column towards the bottom. And we promise not to spam you. It's hard enough to work out that system that we have in city to send out those emails, so we're not going to do it a whole lot. But you can stay informed on things that are happening. We don't have a comprehensive engagement effort. So mine is planning, my team. So we're looking at the long range efforts. And we keep folks apprised as much as we can. But then when we're done with it, it goes over to engineering. And their communications are different than ours. And so there's no comprehensive way to share out information. It is something on my wish list of things to do.
Wonderful. All right, we've got about 10 more minutes and a few more questions in the chat box, so please feel free to put any more questions in. Diana says she often hears people say that the key to driving safer streets is ensuring drivers adhere to vehicle laws. This requires law enforcement to be watching. Can you comment on a personnel approach versus a built environment approach? And does the city have any policy on this?
Well, that is a very complex issue. So I will start off with saying that we work, obviously I mentioned this earlier, collaboratively with our police department and the traffic team. And they also care about transportation safety. And in fact, Councilmember Jennings has requested of the police department, what would it take for you to have enough staffing to do traffic enforcement? Because the traffic enforcement team is quite small. And it was significant to staff up. My understanding is that the police department is understaffed and staffing is difficult. I don't have a lot of details about that because I don't work for the police department. However, there are also those that have concerns about policing for traffic enforcement issues. And is that the right approach? And so there is this balance. And I personally believe that we need to design our streets to get the outcomes that we want. The biggest challenge with that is that it costs a lot of money to design our streets to get to the outcomes that we want. And so maybe there is a happy medium. And I hope there is. And because we're not going to get it one way or the other. We can't do only enforcement. We can't only rely on the infrastructure. But there are challenges with enforcement and making that happen. One of the things that we were interested in the city of Sacramento that is not allowed in California, but is allowed in many other states, is automated speed enforcement. So in other states, they can set up, we'll call them cameras on streets to determine how fast you're going and automatically issue citation if you're going, let's say 10 or 12 miles an hour over the speed limit. In fact, New York State just allowed it to happen 24/7. And it's proven to be effective. However, it's not legal in California. And there have been a number of tries at the state level over the last 3 to 5 years to try to make that legal in California, and it hasn't been successful in passing. And a lot of those concerns were around equity. Because if you've looked at our safety data, the highest numbers of severe injuries and crashes and fatalities are happening in our under-resourced communities, our communities that are Black and brown. And then are we putting cameras in our Black and brown communities and issuing them citations at a higher rate than other folks? And so the woman who was sponsoring, Assemblymember Freeman, sponsored the bill. She tried to find solutions to address that by setting up processes to evaluate whether or not it's being implemented equitable or not. However, it just did not pass. But it's a potential solution, but not yet available in California. And if it were to be implemented, it should be done in a thoughtful way to make sure that it is equitable. So that's a long answer to a relatively short question, but I have a lot of thoughts on it.
Great. we have two last questions. We have one comment. Devin loves the 2nd Avenue closure. It's making biking trips much safer and practical for him. So he really appreciates that. Vincent wants to know, as we're prioritizing these already approved projects, are there any of them being done now? And what areas receiving the highest dollar amount of prioritized projects?
Interesting. Okay, so those are a lot of questions. My goodness. Okay, so yeah, we are collecting information how to prioritize currently planned projects. And I'm going to do a plug. If you have other things that you'd like to see that aren't planned, please let us know. Where are the currently funded projects are? Well, you can see on the map. Hold on. I'm going to zoom out. You know, it's not loading because I'm zooming. So a lot of the projects right now are funded or downtown, the Del Rio Trail that heads down south. Florin Road is one of my most favorite funded projects right now, which is near the light rail station and near Luther Burbank High School. Big effort, big Vision Zero safety projects. I'm really excited for that one to move forward. There's another project on West El Camino. We haven't done a full equity analysis on where they are funded and aren't funded. We tried to do that historically and look back. Unfortunately, our data wasn't super accurate because our systems for tracking this years ago were different, and merging them in has been a challenge. However, Vincent, a big commitment that I have is to ensure this process is equitable, and ideally the outcomes are equitable so that the city is investing its dollars in a fashion that best meets our community's needs.
Great. All right. And Gina, we see your comment again about the website and the maps. And I think that's a great idea of trying to get some librarians on board with being able to load it and navigate it for some people who might have difficulty accessing online. I love that idea.
Me too. Libraries are the best.
Yeah, and especially from engagement, the more people that we can empower kind of getting their eyes on this map, the better. So again, I really appreciate everybody's comments here. It doesn't, we're kind of drying up on some of the questions. If they have, we have time, we do have time, Diana, for one more. You asked us how we reached out to these groups. The engagement process has been done in a few different ways. We've been calling, we've been visiting folks. As Jennifer mentioned, she's been doing a lot of agency meetings, committee meetings, neighborhood association meetings.
A lot of meetings.
We're trying to hit everybody a little bit on, so we had a lot of our agency partners shared things on their social medias, which we really, really appreciate, and trying to, how did we choose the actual groups? We cast a wide net. Really is really anyone who is interested in active transportation, as well as any community members far and wide. And like Jennifer said, we had a great opportunity during the second round to understand what communities we hadn't heard from, what communities we wanted to hear a little bit more from, and are really diving into some of those communities to make sure that we're getting engagement from everywhere.
Yeah, I think just to add to that, Diana, is we're tracking where the comments are coming from. And we're hearing from a lot of the neighborhoods that are better connected, that have maybe a little bit more affluence. And so what we're doing is seeing where comments are coming from and where they're not. And where they're not coming from, I'm doing a couple of phone calls. So today I reached out to the Active Transportation Commissioner for North of Thomas. And I said, hey, we're not getting a lot of input from North of Thomas. Can you help share the word out? I did the same thing for the Active Transportation Commissioner who represents Southeast Sacramento. Tahoe Park, Colonial Heights, the Elder Creek area. And so we're actively live checking that and then reaching out to folks that we built relationships with to try to help get that word out.
Great. If you want to wrap it up, Jennifer, I'll put the website in the chat just to remind people to go there.
Great. Sometimes they become asked a planner or a question, and I'm always glad to do that as well. But don't forget, the main purpose of this is to tell us your thoughts and comments on the initial prioritization, because my job is to facilitate the process. I'm hoping that you think your job is to tell me what you think is important and how well we did at meeting those goals. So please look at the story map, see the background, review the initial prioritization, and share your comments. And then tell your friends, tell your neighbors, tell folks that you work with about this, because quite frankly, we're government. Maybe we're not the best at getting the word out. We're not marketing gurus. We're definitely not influencers. And so you helping us will help us get the word out. And I thank you for your time on this wonderful Wednesday night. I said, go outside, spend some time outside now. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.